Hello, everyone, and welcome to March. I don't know how it became March, but here we are. I am so thrilled to welcome you all because March is a very special month. It's a special community call that we're having to celebrate Women's History Month as well as International Women's Day. And as we get started, I know we're letting more people in from around the world as a part of our community. I would love if you would put in the chat where you're calling in from and who is one woman that you really admire. It could be in your community, it could be in your family, it could be in the sustainable fashion space, just one woman that you admire. It's always fun to see that. And to get us going, I can go. I'm Aisha. I'm the founder of Remake. I've been on this wonderful journey with you all, building community for the last decade to center human rights and climate justice in the fashion industry. And actually, there are three women that I really, really admire: Molly, Emma, and Ngozi. And you are going to hear from them in a little bit around how they found their why, how they make changes every single day. And I can't think of a better way to celebrate March. We have Calgary, Marissa from Calgary, who gives a shout out to her mom. I love that. Mothers are really important. We're going to be talking about that. From Lisbon, we have Alexis, who said Ursula. Yes, Ursula is the original OG, started fashion revolution. Molly has too many women in her life. What a wonderful problem to have. We have from Brainbridge, again, another shout out to mom. Anyone else? Keep these coming. We absolutely love to see it. And for those of you who just joined, or for those of you who are new to Remake, I'm Aisha, the founder of Remake. We have been on a mission to center women, to be thinking about women's rights and climate justice in fashion. And I'm so excited to welcome you this Women's History Month to honor three trailblazing women who are really shaping history, changing norms, and leading us towards a more equitable and just future. You know, mark your calendars. March 8th is International Women's Day. And it's not just a day of celebration, but really it's a global call, a call for gender equality all over the world. And it's deeply rooted in the labor movement and all of the organizing fight and energy that we know so well here at Remake. And so I really hope, I know the world with the doom scrolling and as we read the news can feel like a dumpster fire, but I really hope that we're setting that intention this March to be thinking about the incredible contributions of women in every field. And we're going to be hearing from three phenomenal women in just a moment. As Allison brings them up, and we spotlight them. You know, the reason as we looked across our diverse, incredible Remake community, I was like, who are phenomenal women who have always rewritten their own rules, who think about sustainability, who think about social justice, and who are using their voice and creativity and platform in new and inspiring ways. And so first we welcome up to the stage Molly Gotchman. She's a visionary artist and, in her own words, an activist who uses public art to spark dialogue, change norms, and build deeper connections with community. I remember seeing, Molly, your last artwork where we had a picnic within the art installation and some students stopped by, and it was really a way of fostering dialogue. And I know that so much of what your latest project is similar to that. It's called Monuments of Motherhood, redefining our understanding of care, intimacy, and resilience. So welcome, Molly. We then have Emma Gage, who was one of my favorite people to meet when I was in New York last. Emma is the founder and designer of MELKE. I hope I said that properly, Emma. It's a call to her Midwestern roots and how she pronounces milk. And it is truly a brand. It's fun, huh, Molly? It's truly a brand that embodies so much of what we care about at Remake. Thinking about bold ethical design, thinking about labor rights, thinking about radical transparency, and thinking about how we can uplift women rather than exploit them in the fashion industry. Emma's just coming off Fashion Week. She's also in the midst of planning her wedding. And so we're so happy to have her here. Last, but so certainly not least, is one of my personal sheroes, Ngozi, who is the founder and executive director of Custom Collaborative. Custom Collaborative has been on a mission singularly focused to empower immigrant and low-income women with the skills to have careers in the sustainable fashion movement. Ngozi often uses her platform to educate, empower, and inspire women. And I know that she is changing lives every single day, one stitch at a time. How amazing is this? Are you all excited? Keep it coming in terms of who inspires you. And as we get into this conversation, please do put questions in the chat. We'll also unmute and make sure you have a chance. What I'm so excited about is that these women come from different backgrounds, but all of you have one central mission in many ways, which is that you value transparency, creativity, equity, and sustainability. And so let's go ahead and get started. Ngozi, I'm going to come to you first. And really, I think for so many in our community, there's often the question of, what's the founding story? How did you decide to become an advocate for change, to center women in your work? Really, what's your why, Ngozi?
Well, that is a really big question, Aisha. So give me a minute. I just got off of a plane a few hours ago. So I'm thinking as I'm talking. But first, I want to thank you for creating this space where all of us can be here together and meet each other and talk to each other. We're all learning, whether we're somebody who's on the platform talking today or in the comments. And so really grateful to you for creating this space for all of us to be here during Women's History Month. And before I say why I started Custom Collaborative, I just want to bring up the joy, because you're right, we could be doom scrolling. There's so many horrible things going on. And my friend Dominique Drakeford had in her Instagram today a quote: "That feeling of taking action and the joy of creating something new is motivating and fills you with a deep sense of purpose." So just thinking about, many of us took action a couple of days ago with not buying. We're all taking action right now, being on this call and taking the time to think deeply and reflect. And so again, I'm grateful to be here. Just briefly, I started Custom Collaborative because I got clothes made by women from the global South. They were making clothes for me that like fit my body, custom made clothes. And that experience was so meaningful for me, not just that I had clothes that were like exactly what I wanted, that fit my body perfectly, but that also I was able to use my money that went directly to a person who not just had skills, but also like needed it and could use that to reinvest in her community. So there was a longer road, but from that, I got the idea to start Custom Collaborative to help women like her and women like her who could learn to sew and create sustainable careers and really be the creators and owners of fashion rather than those who are exploited by it.
I love that so much. And Emma, I'm going to bring you into the conversation. I love on your website where it says, you've heard about almond milk and you've heard about avocado milk, and maybe you've just heard about regular milk. But what was your founding story to start Milk? And, when you think about your journey, really it's how did it begin? And why did you decide empowering women is so key for this brand to be successful?
Wow. So similarly, it's a long story, but I'll keep it short. I always knew that I wanted to go into fashion design, and I always knew that I wanted to have my own business. And growing up, my family had done a lot of work to combat human trafficking and child sex trafficking. So I was always aware of labor rights and inequities from the time of being like 6 years old up into my adult life. And as I studied design, I kind of was like, oh, well, one day I'll find a way to like meld the worlds together. And again, I always knew that I wanted to have my own company. I knew that I had the brand name picked out like right after I graduated, and that's Melk. It was honoring a sense of humor. Well, there's also individualism because it's how I pronounce milk. And my friends would lovingly make fun of my accent from Minnesota. So I decided that I wasn't going to change that about myself. I was going to honor it and turn it into a brand based around individualism, authenticity, and humor. So I worked in the industry, honestly, for only about 3.5 years, if I'm being super honest, probably only 3 years from the periods of when I was unemployed. And then COVID hit. And I knew at the start that I wanted to kind of take a break, but I knew that I didn't want to go back and compete in the industry for another design role. And ultimately, I realized that being on unemployment and with COVID relief, I had all of the funding to start a business. Um, and from there, I knew that I wanted to focus on labor rights with partnering locally, doing my production in New York City, working with other small businesses, finding people on Etsy, specifically female-founded businesses. So even from there, I jumped into doing all of our knitwear manufacturing with a group called Coco in India, and they're called Knit One, Change One. And they focus on economic stability for women in their communities to also provide back for their own stability in life. And that's kind of the quintessential goal of where I want all of my production to fall. So I see that as being very important with sourcing and doing production based in New York City. I produce in Williamsburg. I get all of my zippers from the garment district. All of our pleating is done from a company that's been around for about 80 years now. Our embroidery is done with a small woman-ran business here in the city. And then I work with another small embroiderer who's based out of Kyiv in Ukraine. So to me, it was just this kind of almost domino effect of I had an idea and then I started learning more and it kind of just topples into itself of here's what I want to do, here's the next step. And now it's really been oriented around uplifting women and labor rights from an economic standpoint. I still really focus on sustainability and materials. We're using a lot of dead stock, but to me, at the core of Melk, it really is about the production and uplifting the craftsmanship behind it.
I love that so much, Emma, because so often, the sustainability conversation is divorced from the actual people, the actual women making our clothes. Molly, I'd love to bring you into this conversation to share what inspired you to become an advocate for change, and how do you think your art, your activism, all the ways that you build community and connection is shaped by you yourself being a trailblazing woman?
Well, I appreciate you building connection. I actually have a work that I'm getting ready to deinstall at the end of the month called Ukraine Russia, which is part of a 200-foot long sculpture in the shape of the Ukraine-Russia border. So I want to connect with you, Emma, to find out who you're using with the embroidery, right? I feel like there's connections already happening and we're just right into the call. So when I was in my 20s, I was doing sculpture using fabric. And I was really interested in how all these threads came together to build something stronger, right? And the strength of fabric and the strength of coming together. And so I think that together we can create movement. Now these sculptures, I froze their shapes using a resin, and so they're falling really slowly over time, and you don't see it from day to day. But over time, you can see how they are transforming, and so I think I'm always thinking about my activism, and I guess just kind of naturally because whatever is going on in my head comes out in my art, whether I know it or not sometimes. So.
That's so beautiful, Molly. And I know that, you've never shied away from difficult things that are happening in the world, but yet making art sort of that beauty and inspiration of bringing it to the forefront. There was a recent Forbes article that was highlighting your upcoming project, which I know just got unveiled in the Memphis Medical District, where it's really a monument to motherhood, creating spaces and reflection through public art. You saw lots of people in the chat saying, my mom inspires you. Can you walk us through your vision behind this project and how you see art as a catalyst for social change?
Yes, I grew up with monuments to cruelty. And actually the site where these monuments are was a monument to cruelty and barbarism. And I wanted monuments to care. And someone told me this morning, they said, oh my goodness, the old monument was on this huge pedestal. It was huge. I was like, and yours is just on the grass. I'm like, exactly. It's like on the same land as all of us, standing on the same ground as all of us. And it is a monument to the idea of caregiving, right? So it's not just to one individual, it's to care overall, right? And inviting us to value this essential act, which has been so devalued. And so I had to make these out of bronze. Most of my work, like the Ukraine-Russia border work, for example, uses inexpensive materials, sometimes trash, right? But this had to be bronze, which is an amalgamation of different metals coming together. And it's what precious, honored, revered statues have been in historically. But when you touch bronze, you transform it. So that's why you'll see parts that are shiny. There are people who have rubbed it the most, and it absorbs what's in our environment, right? It absorbs the context, but absorbs really like the chemicals, right? Of what's in the air. It absorbs the chemicals in the soil, what, lands on it from above. And comes up from below. Already these, I can see like little bits of pink on one part where I'm like, what's in the soil right there that's changing it right here? And so it's about relationship. And it's also an invitation to connect, to come together. And I hope that my works invite healing, but also remind us of what we should be revering and what we should be honoring, which is care, like, and caring for one another and showing up and supporting one another. So.
I love that so much, Molly. Taking something where there was a history of cruelty and sculptures that shaped our very dark history and making it into, the unsung beauty and joy of care work. So for those of you who are curious, Molly's Forbes article is phenomenal. And Ngozi, I wanted to come to you to be talking about this idea with custom collaborative where you intuitively know that all women possess the skills, the confidence, and most importantly, the agency to contribute to their own sustainable future, regardless of their race or socioeconomic background. When you think of the work that you do, and I know you've been in it a long time, how do race, class, and other identities shape and challenge the women that you work with when it comes to working in the fashion industry? And how do you make sure that Custom Collaborative is truly an inclusive place for women to thrive?
Thank you for asking. I think to answer your last question first, how do we make sure that Custom Collaborative is a truly inclusive place? When people think about, the phrase DEI, which I say is actually a way to enact the civil rights laws of the United States, I always focus on the E, the equity. I feel like the diversity, you can have a diverse looking group of people at the table, but everybody doesn't have to be included. And inclusion is fine, but people have to get to that table. And so I really think about equity, which is a precondition for people actually participating in society or anything else. And so to create equity, we center our participants first by asking them what they need. What do you need to be here? What do you want to get out of this experience? What do you need from your peers? What do you need from us? So just thinking about our first program, our training institute, we provide women a stipend to be in our training program. We provide them transportation benefits. We also check with them to make sure that what we're giving is what they need because we're receiving something from them as well. So just to think also about your other question in your statement, I think that you're right that every woman has what she needs except for opportunity and access, because all of us who are alive today are here because we had ancestors who were resilient and brought us to the point, right? Like otherwise we wouldn't be here. And so if I look at the women who in the US specifically, are from Black and Brown communities, or at the women of the Global South in general, we recognize that they have had more barriers. And so they have probably even more strength and resilience than average. And so then the question is like, well, why aren't they leading these movements? Why are they doing all of the labor and not reaping as much as the rewards. And so as a staff, as a team, those are the principles, some of the principles that we hold in mind. And also, we've got women with us who've come to New York from 25 or more different countries. And they're all here, they're all strivers, or their parents were. And so we want to show that we can all really get along and do the work, and that we have the same goals, and not to focus as much on our difference, but again, to make an equitable space where we can all be heard and contribute.
Thank you for naming that, Ngozi, especially when it comes to access, resources, making sure, sometimes you talk about empowering women, but are not thinking about the systemic barriers, and that's so key. One of the core principles at Remake has always been radical collaboration. And I think that's something women in particular are quite good at. I sometimes dream of if we were heads of states, how different it would be, because there wouldn't be that much ego, hey? And Emma, that's something that Melk really embodies, is this idea of partnerships. So can you talk about how for your brand and your practice, partnerships and linking arms with other women has been so key and important? No, I think you're muted.
Yes, I am. Not anymore. I think the partnerships have been beneficial in the most way that they really add new kind of invigoration into my work. Coming from a personal standpoint, it's really, really hard to be a business owner. It's really hard to be a female business owner. And it's very, very, very hard to be a female business owner in a creative field, especially in the fashion industry. There are a lot of barriers. It's really difficult to connect with people. I've had opportunities where I'm in the same room with people, maybe 6 or 7 or 8 different times, and I have to reintroduce myself to the same person every time. So to me, what I really choose to focus on is those partnerships that give me the energy that help me go forward and bring joy into the work that I'm doing. So, I'll go back to our knitwear provider, the woman who owns the organization. She'll send me options of things that she thinks that I might find really exciting, because she knows that I like working with more unique materials or brighter colors. And that to me always kind of pushes me forward and adds invigoration into this partnership, because she's showing that she cares through the excitement of what I'm building. Or even with our manufacturing partners, especially the ones here in Williamsburg, I do not have a production background. I minored in product development, but that's not the same as production. So I've learned over the past 5 years how to be organized, but I still feel very disorganized. But then she'll make a comment of, oh my gosh, this is so much more organized than other people. And not to put down other people, but that's like, to me, those partnerships where women are complementing each other or teaching each other, it really helps me keep going, because it can be lonely sometimes and you get stuck in your own world. So when you kind of break out of that and you ask for help or you talk to a partner, that's something that is really encouraging, and I think is really important to look at, is like, you don't have to put up with people who are, you know, making you feel bad. Like, yes, you might have to be in the same circle as them, but like, they're not the ones that carry the weight. To me, it's really important to look at partners who are uplifting you and bringing joy into what you're doing.
That's so important, Emma, and thank you for naming that. I've often thought about this. Here we have a community of hundreds of thousands. We reach millions of people through Remake, and yet when you sit at the very top, it can be lonely. And to name that not all women are allies, and we do get torn down. And so really thinking about who you're partnering with and what their intentions are
Mhm.
so important.
And I
Molly,
will say, though, I've never had an issue with a woman in the fashion space. I don't think, like, looking back, I don't think there's any
yes,
where I would be like, oh, she made me feel so bad. It's
yeah.
usually not women that are the ones blocking the path.
Name it, name it.
It's the
Appreciate
man.
that, Emma. And Molly, I was thinking a lot about your art. I was a little bit watching the Oscars last night. I was like, gosh, for this platform, it's such a missed opportunity to be talking about all the things happening in our world. And when I think about your art, particularly because it is in public spaces, that so much of what you do, Molly, is using art as a powerful tool for social change. It can disrupt how we think, it can inspire us, it can also be healing. Can you talk about how your work, whether the current installation or past works, challenges dominant narratives and really fosters new conversations and connections?
Well, dominant narrative is usually white guy on a horse, sometimes with a weapon. Uh, and so I think like my work is not about this like one singular person. It's not even like right now. I mean, it might be at one point one caregiver, right? But it's all of us, right? These are monuments to all of us because we're all giving care in some way. We're all showing up as a mother. You don't have to be a biological mother for this to be representing you. Like if we're mothering our planet, if we're mothering our friends, if we're mothering ourselves, if we're really showing up and as a caring person, this is a monument to you. And I love what you said, Ngozi, about ancestors, because I see us as breathing monuments to our ancestors. And that really resonated with me. So I think that's how we're challenging the dominant narrative. And I'm installing in April at the entrance of Prospect Park. So for anyone who's in New York or comes to New York, where the giant arches, look at that arch. And I think there's more weapons than people in it. and like, and it's Grand Army Plaza. So this is a monument to care right next to that. So, and I thought it was really big, but it's not nearly as big as the arch. So it does look a little puny, but still it's taking up space. It's taking up space in public and really acknowledging that we are all to be honored. We are all these caregivers. And that should be the narrative and what connects us.
So beautiful and so inclusive, Molly, because to your point, we do mothering in all kinds of ways. And so, what's the tradition? And really to be thinking about all the unseen labor, right? Which is something I know that Emma and Ngozi through their practice deeply understand. Ngozi, I know that you truly come to this work with mentorship and support, lifting up. And we met on Friday, we're talking about whether it's your team, whether it's your board members, whether it's the women who go through the custom collaborative program. You're constantly lifting up women in every stage of their career. And here we have some 70 people on this call from around the world. A lot of them are young women who aspire to be leaders and change makers in their own practice. What advice would you have for the people on this call?
I have two things. One that a mentor told me was whatever your idea is, to write it down, right? You've got to write down your idea and however you're getting towards it, because otherwise you can't share it with other people and get feedback. And otherwise you can't like iterate on it. It's just all in your head. I know that people are sometimes nervous to share their ideas with people because they think that people will steal their ideas. But actually, nobody can bring to life your idea except for you, right? And so you've just got to take a leap and write it down, and then you have something that you can even refer back to. So if I just think about when I started Custom Collaborative, the first concept paper that I wrote was in, I think, November 2014. And then we opened our doors in October 2016. And so when people say, oh, this is so well organized, you've thought of everything. Yeah, because I wrote it down and I had to continuously get feedback from other people. But that also gives other people a place where they can come in. And I think the other thing is to reflect on why you want to do what it is that you want to do. Sometimes we want to do things and it just seems like, oh, I'm going to go do this thing, but that might not be the thing that you need or that the world needs if you haven't actually analyzed and looked deeply at your intentions. So it's really the why do you want to do this? Because then you can see, oh, is there somebody else already doing this? Can I join with them, align with this? But like, why? So just to be super concrete, if it's something that's going to just fill you, but maybe not be what the world needs, it's going to be hard to get other people to join in and really make it happen in a meaningful way. So just what is the why? Why are you doing this? Because people are going to ask you this question, just like you asked me when I got on this call. Why did you start Custom Collaborative? You know, like Molly, why is your art your art? Emma, why did you decide to start Milk and why is it called Milk? And my family's from the Midwest, from Indiana. Half of my family is. So yes, shout out to the best accent.
I love that. There's so much to unpack here, especially in Ngozi. I think about this a lot where, asking your why is so key because it's to say, is it your own hubris? Is it your own ego? Or is it that the world really needs this gift right now? And the fact that feedback is really a radical act of love. It's something that I think sometimes it can be hard to listen when you have a vision that you've articulated. But that's really powerful advice. Molly, coming to you, you've had such an illustrious career as an artist, as a philanthropist, as an activist. What would you say is your greatest accomplishment as a change maker?
I think true deep change happens really slowly over time. So if you ask me like, what did I achieve this month? I would say nothing, right? Like even though I had this incredible opening, but I think like the real achievements are for me, like that I'm still working with people who I admire so much, who I have respect for, and I think we've built trust. And I look at my relationships in life and being able to hold on to that because relationships are complex, and it is about, and Ngozi said, like listening first, like what do you need? Like how can this work for all of us? And so I think when I think of my accomplishments, I think of, the people who are still in my life and still with me. And nothing I've achieved have I achieved alone. Like I've achieved it all in community. And so the fact that other people are still willing to, work with me and trust me with their work and their efforts and their like brain power is my single biggest accomplishment, but it's the one that I work to maintain every day. And maintaining things is hard.
That's so important, Molly, especially because as someone who does a lot of mentorship of young change makers, sometimes it's hard to be patient, but to hear you say it's the whole body of work, right? And change is not linear, rather than thinking about that one particular way that you've made an impact. Emma, you said something really important, which is, that there have been a lot of women whose shoulders you rest on that have lifted you up. And I think it's so refreshing to hear because there are so many people on this call that work in and around fashion that have the devil's wears Prada type of experience, where it's to say, are women really allies of one another? So I'd be curious if you could give us some concrete examples of women who've mentored and supported you along the way.
Well, definitely my mom. um, it's funny because when I started, I didn't have like a clear picture of like what my ideal like target customer is. And then as time has gone on and I see the work that my mom does and she wears her Melk suits into meetings and when she's going to conferences, she's like powerful, strong, funny. That's going to become the epitome of like who I'm designing for. And I would say like there's no one that I can pinpoint where it's like, oh, this one constant person who's been in my life or helping me as a business owner for the past 5 years. People kind of come and go. And a lot of the times it's been women who see something I'm wearing in the line at the post office and make a comment on it and then say, oh, I'm an artist. Let's do something together. Or even women who are customers of mine who come into the studio and buy things and say like, oh, this is what I've been looking for, or, this is the personality I want to represent. I think it's really those small moments from other women that are ones that I view as like the kind of mentorship and why I keep doing what I'm doing, and seeing this space where, I did go to a showroom once to try to have them pick up my line, and they were like, "Oh, I don't really see anyone wearing this." And then the next day I went to my studio and had two women come in and spend $6,000. Um, so that to me, it's kind of like that to me is mentorship in a way of looking at it and saying like, no, I see these women, like women don't always want like the plain boring suiting. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but like people come in and want that personality, they want that joy, they want that creativity, and that to me is what like I really aspire for and kind of see as the uplifting mentorship in the world that I'm in.
I love that. And for those of you who haven't checked out, Melk just showed at Fashion Week. It's cheeky, it's whimsical, it's different, and absolutely love
Yeah.
to see it, Emma. We're going to do a quick rapid round with the three of you, and then there's questions coming in hard and fast. So apparently, I can't hoard you lovely ladies all to myself. One of the things I think about a lot, especially with a decade of Remake under my belt, is impact. There are days of small impact and there are days of big impact, but sometimes change making can feel so amorphous. And a decade later, we can say we have remade the closets of 7 million citizens. We have recovered millions of dollars in stolen wages for garment workers, particularly at the height of the pandemic. We have built this machinery of, as I lovingly like to call our change makers, so many on the call today and many who listen afterwards, who've gone on in their own communities to make an impact. And so when you all think about impact, how do you measure? How do you think about, okay, the work that I'm doing is making a difference, knowing that it's not always easy to do that? And, so there's a sort of impact today, and how do you think about that? And then what is the legacy that you're hoping to leave for future generations? I'm thinking about that a lot as a mom to 13 and 15-year-old, especially as we think about rollback in climate change around the world, and thinking about all the ways that sometimes it feels that change is not linear and we had momentum and yet we didn't. So the question is, how do you measure impact today? And what do you hope to be your legacy for future generations? And Molly, I'll come to you first.
This opportunity to share is a way to measure my impact. I think having my work get out there so that it can be part of this, building that Emma referenced with standing on the shoulders of others, so that people can say, no, you can make a monument about a group of people or an idea. It doesn't have to be about the singular narrative. So that people can reference it, and then it allows them to build on that, and for people to value care, right? To say like this type of thing, like winning this argument is not what matters. Like maybe just caring and showing up with care is something to value. And I think if I was leaving a legacy, it would be the, like the how of doing it with care and good intention.
I love that. And Emma, impact today, impact you hope for the future?
I have to say that I would jump on top of the care aspect. I think to me, what measures the most important impact is when I hear feedback from the people who have worked with us on our events or internships. When people come to me and say, as a student, they say, oh, I finally felt like I interned somewhere where they actually cared about my opinion, or they wanted me to learn and grow. Or students have come and volunteered at our shows and said, I knew I wanted to volunteer here because I had a feeling that like my identity and myself would be respected and that I would have the opportunity to express myself. Or even guests who come into the space and say, wow, that was a much needed break from the craziness that Fashion Week usually is. I always feel so good when I leave a Melk show. To me, that's the most important impact. I love the sales side of it because that makes me so I can keep my business going. I need that. That's a good impact. But at the end of the day, if everything stopped. I think that would be the most important thing to me, is knowing that for a moment I created a space where people felt safe and joyful and calm in this world. And that to me is what I want to keep going, which is the energy that's kind of imbued into or infused into our clothing as well.
I love that you're not naming the sort of chaotic overproduction, all the things that Fashion Week has been known for, right?
No,
But
which, like, to
calmness.
me, I still feel like it's chaotic, and then people will come up afterwards and be like, "Oh, that was I've never worked somewhere where it was so organized." I was like, "That's my production team." Like, they are doing God's work here, keeping everything organized. But like, it goes a long way when people know that they like felt calm and respected, and especially hearing it from models that we work with, like that even carries such a strong weight. I think that to me is the most important impact, that people who volunteer their time to work with you feel good that they did that.
Amazing. And Ngozi, close us out. And then I promise everyone I'm going to open it up to questions. So if you have burning questions, put them in the chat, or we can also unmute you and you can introduce yourself and ask the question directly.
So that's a great question, thinking about impact. I think immediately it's the women in our networks who have said, oh, like literally, this has changed my life. I'm a better mother. I found my best friend here. I got paid for my first fashion job because of custom collaborative, right? Because fashion is notorious for not paying people for working. And so also I think like Emma said, like also not just the more external people, but the internal folks. So one of my reports said to me recently, I saw how you walk through that like performance review that we did with so and so. And I was really inspired by that, right? Because a lot of people, when they receive performance reviews, people are telling them what's bad, 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 right? And I'm just like, oh, actually, I think you did this well. And I think you did it better than you rated yourself in your self evaluation. So being able to give people that type of feedback. And yeah, I do think a lot of it comes from what I hear from our team, because sometimes the women in our programs are nervous to tell me about how things have shaped them. But even like an employee was saying like, oh, we had this intern and she's going to be spoiled for any other job because we listened to her here and she had a real role and we were respectful for her and we all take notes, not just the intern taking notes in the meeting. So I think that's one thing, just showing people that they can be treated equitably and that that's what they should expect, right? And I think the other thing in terms of long term is showing that you can have like as many acts as you want to, right? Because I started Custom Collaborative 10 years ago almost, and this was not the first work that I've done, right? But you can do many things and that you can find people who align with you and join that community or create your own community. That's what I think of as like a long lasting impact, so that there are more Ngozis and Emmas and Mollys and Aishas coming along who are doing their things and changing trajectories.
I love that. Thinking about making space, I think, is something you all said, respect, which I think in many ways is so often not noted, and making sure that, I think of this as an intergenerational panel of, who are the people that we are to learn from, who came before us, and what are the seeds we're planting for those who come after. Molly, there's a question here for you in terms of art is always ahead of its time. And in this current moment, it just feels so hard to be making a difference. So, how do you think about what topics you select? How do you think about building that art, joy, and community at a time when it just feels so hard to be creative?
Today I was thinking about that true change takes a long time. And like we've been experiencing these rapid changes that I think must be from some kind of cancerous thing that's been evolving for a while, right? But so I think I think you just keep pushing. You just like, like you pay attention to what's happening, right? Like, for example, the Ukraine work, right? Like I was working on this work. I guess it's more meaningful today than it was, a year ago when I started it, right? So in that way, things are ahead of your time because you're listening and you're able to respond creatively and bring these conversations. And it is a record of what we're thinking of, because I rarely think of an artwork and realize and think, oh, there's no one else who ever did anything similar to this. There's always someone else. There's always some kind of movement and connection. And like, I feel like Ngozi and Emma and I have so much, overlap. I don't know if that answers that.
I mean, there's sort of a follow-up question to that, Emma. You were out the gate early when you were thinking about honoring Ukraine, and then you think about everything that's happening there now. Do you go back and revisit that artwork, or are you sort of then moving on to the next thing?
So when I started working with the embroiderer in Ukraine, it honestly wasn't because of everything happening.
Yeah.
I started working with her maybe a year before the war broke out, and it slowly escalated from there. And I, would message her every so often and be like, how's it going? And she was kind of like, this has been going on for so long, like, we're fine. And then, 2 weeks later, the tone completely changed. And it went from me messaging her and her saying, like, my family's safe, like, we're gonna win, we can hear all of the bombing, but like, we're not going anywhere. And then ultimately to everything being shut down and not being able to contact her, not hearing from her for about another year. And then I was ordering something else off of Etsy to work on a new collection, and I saw that it was shipping from Ukraine, and I was like, "Oh my God, shipping is back." And I went to check her site and it was active, and I instantly just bought like everything I could that fit with the theme of the collection. And I messaged her and she answered right away, and I just like broke down crying because I was so happy that she was okay and that she was able to go back to work. That's all she wanted to do. Like, I kept telling her, like, let me know if I can send you anything. Like, if you want some sort of partnership, like, I can make the pieces more expensive and like give you the money, like charge me more, like we'll bake it in. And all she kept saying, she would never answer a message like that. It was just, I want to get back to work. Like, I want to work. Let me know. So now all of our fish patches that we do are exclusively made with her. They're custom for us.
Yeah.
So I always go back and continue to work with her. And I would say that it's not necessarily that I work with her because of the war in Ukraine, but I work with her because it really taught me the importance of what creativity and passion and just a love for your craft means. Of course, working with her helps her from an economic standpoint in Ukraine, but now I have this like really passionate desire to uplift her and have her as a partner, not just because of what she's going through, but because she's incredibly, incredibly talented.
See, and there are so many things to unpack there, Emma, but the fact that you treated her as a partner with dignity and respect to start with, because we know most supply chains, people don't even know where the clothes are made or who's making them. And so at a moment where she needed that partnership in a different way, you were able to step up. Kelsey has a funny question for you. She wants to know
I
what's the
saw that
deal
one.
with Melk's Ranch mascot.
Ranchy?
Yes. And if people don't know Ranchy, we'll put Ranchy in the chat.
Yeah. So for our last show, it was inspired by a Midwestern supper club. And going into this year, I made the decision that I'm not going to be hosting any shows unless they're sponsored and paid for with sponsorship because they're so expensive. So back in October, I started reaching out to Hidden Valley Ranch to do a partnership with them. Um, Obviously, because of Ranchy, we did secure that partnership and that sponsorship. And they sent us Ranchy, which is Ranch on a Branch, and he was our mascot during Fashion Week. I wonder if I can unblur my background because I have like,
You have Ranchi in the background. I love this also. It's like,
oh,
look,
I
we
have
have to make
three.
it a viable business model. Yes, we can see Ranchi right there.
So Ranchi it started out as our show mascot, and now Ranchi is just our comfort creature that we keep with us.
That's amazing. I'm going to come to Sammy's question. And really, I think, Ngozi, you're best to respond to this. Sammy, by the way, big shout out, was on one of our change makers who was on Fox News, talking about no new clothes and did a marvelous job. Sammy's question, Ngozi, is how can we really get people to connect with women's rights and feminism when it comes to the ethical fashion movement? You know, so often people simply aren't thinking about the women in the supply chain.
That's a great and tough question. Um, I, I think about this in two different ways. For one, you know, we all recognize that we've got more clothes than we need. And I continue to buy clothes, and I think people should buy clothes purposefully, buy endless clothes if that is what you need and you want, and take care of them and wear them forever. But we have so many clothes that sometimes we have to reflect on, like, why are we buying a new piece of clothing, right? So before we tell someone don't buy something um, because someone is being harmed, I think we can get to, like, why are you buying something? And sometimes people are buying things to fill a hole. Like, I use this example that, like, during the first few months of the pandemic, I was buying like all these different lipsticks. And like I said to my colleague, I was like, oh, should I buy this color or that color? He was like, well, you bought both of them last week. And so, like, at this point, you've got like 90 colors of the same lipstick. And so I had to like think about myself, like, well, why do I keep buying lipsticks? Like, what is going on? What am I trying to satisfy? Am I trying to make myself feel better? Right. And so think about it. One, like, what are people trying to achieve? Especially now that we have a lot of work from home, right? When are you wearing these clothes? But I think also part of it is we need to um, remember that the people who have been invisibilized, who are the seamstresses, that we need to give them voice and light and life. And so just thinking about Molly's work of, you know, who are our heroes and where are they? Well, like, the patriarchy has brought us sexism and colorism and racism, right? And so then the reason that we're able to underpay these women or not pay them at all or have them in horrible working conditions is because they are mostly Black and brown and because they're all women. And so then to be able to connect in an easy way, like a succinct way that doesn't feel like it's blaming the consumer, I think is the best way to share with people what's going on. And I think, like, also like looking at like examples. And so if you look at people like Tracy Reese, right? Like, she had a model and she's adjusted her model. And so if we can share information like that, like in a loving way, in a way that like we help bring people in and help them understand like all the systems of oppression and how they're connected to patriarchy, that's what I'm thinking of is a good way.
Absolutely, Ngozi. And Molly, in some ways, I think this is an invitation for maybe your next art installation, you know, for those of us who've been passionate in this movement to say, fashion industry is the only industry in the world that employs upwards of 70 million, mostly Black and brown women. And to Sammy's point, like, why do we consistently dehumanize this workforce when, as Emma's noted, this is high skilled work? And, you know, the racial lens to that, the class lens to that, the overproduction, which, Ngozi, thank you for naming that. The more we make, the climate crisis is upon us, but also it's easier to dehumanize women in the supply chain because we're simply making too much. And so, how do we think about art in some ways to give light and life to garment workers? There's a comment here from Ashley, and I would love to bring it to you, Ngozi, both to you, Molly, both to respond to what Ngozi had to say, but I think you'll have a lot to say about what Ashley's put here, where she's read and seen in several places that what we're experiencing right now is the extinction burst of toxic masculinity and patriarchy. Things are evolving, and this is sort of the last gasping for air reverberance of the old way that is desperately and in vain trying to stay the status quo. And
Wow.
that is something that makes Ashley really empowered and hopeful. Honestly, thinking of this frame makes me want to tear up to say, perhaps this is it, perhaps, and then it'll get better. So, reactions, Molly, to what Ngozi had to say around can art help us humanize garment workers? And what do you think of Ashley's thesis on what we're seeing right now?
I hope so. I tried, with behavior change with my daughter, she was having some challenges, and I thought, oh, this is extinguishing this and this won't happen. So, okay, I hope so. But I don't think we can count on it too. So I think we just continue to organize and do that slow and steady change, and continue to be mindful and work with one another.
Absolutely. There's lots of love for you all in the chat. So I hope you take that as a balm as we walk into March. And we're going to close out with just if you had 2 words to think about what is keeping you hopeful right now. And to give you a moment to think, I'd say, unabashedly for me, it's the Remake community. Every first Monday of the month for 10 years, we've been coming together in community like this virtually. There are lots and lots of activity we'll have for Women's History Month and International Women's Day that it's in person. And to me, the fact that now more than ever we're needing community is what keeps me grounded and hopeful. So Emma, what's keeping you hopeful? 2 words. Oh, muted.
Every time, maybe I'm just trying to buy myself time to get an answer. I would say honest conversation.
Honest conversation. Love that. Ngozi.
I think right now I would say nature, right? Because like the days are getting longer. We're about to start Lent, which literally means the lengthening of the seasons. So like that is keeping me hopeful.
Love
Guys
it.
on this call is keeping me hopeful. I'm thinking about the extinguish, and it's helping me because it's so close to the things tactics I'm working on closely in my home. But right now in the studio, we're working on these castings of my stomach. It's something I wanted to do for a long time, and I'm embracing. And I'm about to wear like really tight pants because I remember I was wearing jeans that weren't. I had gone past that time, like they weren't. But I took them off one night. My daughter was like, "What happened to you? Oh my God, are you okay? What happened to your stomach?" And I was like, "Well, those are just the marks because my jeans are too tight." But I
That's a
that
monument
when
to
I'm like,
motherhood, Molly.
well, what is the drive for fast fashion? It's like this drive that's the same drive to have us like look good in our jeans or whatever it is. Like, oh my God, like and looking for approval but like it's deep stuff like that we're all struggling with in some way, some more than others. And so it's like, well, if we're gonna be putting that pressure on people to show up with certain appearance that communicates what they're doing and how stylish they are and how to perceive them in some way, then we need to like work on serious culture change, right? Like of what is acceptable, and so my daughter doesn't think that I got in a serious accident just because my jeans are
I love that. And as we close out, please join me, all of you, whether it's virtual claps, snaps in the chat, to thank Molly, Emma, and Ngozi for this inspiring conversation, for taking the time to share your stories, your wisdom, your passion, your why. And as we close out, I just remind everyone that Women's History Month is not just about looking back and all the gains that we've made, but it really is about pushing forward. and using our voices and our collective power to keep fighting on. I'll be honest with you, since November, it's been really hard for us here at Remake. You know, a decade of building connection and community organizing, and all of us coming together. And Ngozi's nodding as a nonprofit to say, people are distracted. There's a little bit of deer in the headlights of all the assaults coming at us with what's happening in the world. And I'm here to tell you we keep fighting on. You know, for those of you who are investors in our movement in the call, a plea to please keep supporting us, because we need to come together in community now more than ever. So let's keep supporting one another as women and as allies of women, not just this month, but every single day. Happy Women's History Month. You all have a wonderful March. Thank you, Molly, Emma, and Ngozi. And Remake community, we'll see you same time, same place next month.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.